agencies seamlessly. And then third, also taking another look at potentially modernizing that website. So if any of the lag time might have to do with modernizing that technology a little bit, then we should take a serious look at that. But I think that what you bring up is a really important point, and another reason why we really want to dive a little bit more deeply into the communities that we serve is because the best way to know what's important to people is to talk to them. And the best way to talk to them is to meet them where they are, whether it's on their doorstep or the park in their community or the library or a community event that is already happening. And so this is something that I've heard a little bit. And so again, as we go on, really making sure that we're hearing from people about the issues that that they're having that are impacted by the auditor's office, and making sure that we can move forward in the best way possible. And I will say one other thing, just in terms of transparency. Franklin County has a website that actually shows all of the abatements and the neighborhoods that they're in and the timeline for those. And that's something that I'm really interested in pursuing, because I think one, it's good public policy, two, it increases transparency, and three, to the previous question, when we're talking about sort of differences in taxes and in appraisals and other places, it just adds another layer of transparency so that people can see what's happening in the auditor's office and the impact of some of the policies that other local government entities have on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Denson, what is your stance on the current gun legislation that was passed earlier this year by a Republican majority and then signed into legislation by Governor Mike DeWine? What are your feelings about it? And if you're not in agreement, what are you going to do about it?
Completely against. What we did was, to be quite honest, not only just insulting to all Ohioans, but when you look at the discrepancies and disparities that we just see of numbers of how things play out in our communities across the state of Ohio, it's a complete slap in the face to me as a Black man. We continue to see things happen across this country, unfortunately, but particularly here in Ohio, that are just, it's disgusting. And unfortunately, this is what we see when things happen at the national level, where control is not where certain parties want it to be. They start to drop into states that have these majorities and push on certain bills. And that's why you see across the country certain states introducing the exact same bills with the exact same language. And so when it comes to what do you want to do? What you want to do is stop it. What can I do and what do I have the authority to do is, again, I talked about earlier, just uniting with our allies that are on the ground doing the work to help uplift what we're trying to do to have fair gun legislation. But beyond that, I still have the ability to introduce bills, and that's something that I will continue to do. Introducing bills that are sound, fair, and just to make sense on what needs to happen and what needs to be done. It doesn't mean that when we do it that we live in a reality that it may not go in our favor, but what it says is that this is what we can do and this is what people expect us to do and step up and to have our people support. And so I will continue to do that, but it's a complete embarrassment. It's downright shameful that it's something we have to deal with. And again, it's a personal slap in the face to me when I look at the disparities of the way Black men are treated when it comes to our criminal justice system here in the state of Ohio.
Thank you. I believe the next question, Carol, is directed towards Commissioner Dumas.
Yes. Commissioner Dumas, the next question we have for you is what are you doing as commissioner currently to provide more treatment options for the drug and alcohol addicted and mentally ill to enter treatment facilities and stay as long as necessary to recover? You're on mute. I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you. Sorry. We can't hear you.
I'm changing it now. I'm sorry. One thing we've done is to put money toward drug treatment and addiction treatment. as it relates to mental illness, I mean, that mental illness sometimes leads to alcoholism and drug treatment. I was a keynote speaker at the Mental Health Recovery and Addiction annual meeting just a couple days ago. And I talked about how we have to really work with our providers and make sure they are healthy. They can't do their best if they're not at their best. So mental health is, I've been in mental health for 45 years as a licensed social worker. So that really touches my heart. I understand the importance of it. So I have really advocated for continued money to be given to that. And also as a commission, we all agreed that there should be an increase on the mental health levy this
greater reach than it did. And it did not get us where we needed to be. But the reality of it is we all reacted to a lot of things during COVID and trying to figure out what none of us knew what was the right thing. So perhaps maybe some of his intentions were right, but it didn't get us to where we needed to be. And as we went along with some of those experts that were chosen, it is only my greatest thought that there were probably some people sitting around that table that were chosen to be there that shared some things that this is probably the direction that we should be going as opposed to where it actually went, which is why we probably did not see an outcome that we really desired out of that. Some of the things that I have done is, as I shared earlier, I realized being where I am, the reality of what I could get done. And when it came to health disparities, not related to COVID, but related to the bill that I talked about getting passed, there are so many things health related. But even within that, there were numerous amounts of constituents that reached out to our offices, and we dealt with those case by case, person by person, and tried to connect them to all the services that we could to make sure that people had everything they needed during the time of COVID. And it still goes on today and will continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. And actually, you were the last person, I believe, in that round. So I will pose the final question to each of you, and you have 1 minute to respond. And that is, why should the voters of Hamilton County vote for you come November? And we can start, and we'll just go in order and start with you, Commissioner Dumas.
People, the constituents should vote for me because I've been there. I've been there for 4 years. We're on a trajectory going forward. I have also been, every labor union, almost everyone that I know of, have supported me and endorsed me for this race because the labor unions are the ones that help our middle class come together. We're losing our middle class because we're not allowing our people to speak up for what they want. And also I am educating the people that I had experience with and the ones within the county to let them know that the people have the power. And so I work for you. And if there's an issue or area that you're concerned about, they don't understand sometimes when I respond, but I work for them and that they need to realize the power that they have to move Hamilton County the way they want it to go. So as earlier, I am honest, I have integrity, and I will do what I say I'm going to do. And I am committed to make Hamilton County better.
Thank you, Representative Kelly.
Thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight and for the work that you're doing to communicate with voters about all of these important elections. I'm really excited about the opportunity to serve as Hamilton County Auditor because I've spent my entire career advocating and uplifting hardworking families, and the auditor's office should be a place for a consumer watchdog and somebody who's going to fight for working families every day. I've shown that I have done that through my entire career, and it's something that I'll continue at the auditor's office. We want to make sure that we have an efficient office that is modern and keeps up with the times, and we want to continue my record of collaborating with people in order to help ensure that people have a better life. You know, it's not always easy to stand up against your friends. I've done that in the legislature. Sometimes it's a little easier to stand up against people with whom you disagree. I've done that, but I've always been responsive to my constituents, accountable to them, and transparent. And that's exactly what people can continue to expect from me in the auditor's office. And if people have questions or want to further discuss anything, you can give me an email at bk@bridgetkelly.com.
All right, thank you. And finally, Representative Denson.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak. I want to continue to do what I've been doing, and that's being accountable to the constituents of my district and continue to be accountable to all Ohioans. I think we've done that well. My joke, which it's not much of a joke, but I enjoy being in the position, is I don't have any opposition in this race on either side of the aisle, and I think that is, it speaks volumes. It means that I want to continue to be accessible. I want to continue to work with people, and I want to continue to do the things that I think need to be done. I never see politics or any of this role as anything that's glamorous, but it's a thankless job just to get the job done. And that's, I think, what we did, and we've done quite well. And I want to continue to do that. There's so much work to be done there, and I want to keep my heels dug in deep and continue to do the work. be as accessible as I am and just be as transparent as I am about what we can get done here in the state of Ohio, and appreciate all the support of those who I can gain it from. Thank you.
Thank you. And to all of our candidates that joined us, and it's important for you to know that we did not invite all candidates to participate in this forum. So we thank you for making yourselves available this evening because it's very important. And the Coalition of for Just Hamilton County wants to support individuals that they believe support them. And they're fighting for justice and equality in Hamilton County, which is what the overall mission and purpose of the coalition is all about. I want to thank all of those who have joined us for the first hour. The second hour, we are scheduled to have, and give me 1 second here, second hour today from 8 to 9. We are scheduled to have the justice of the Judge Terry Jamison, who's running for the Ohio Supreme Court Justice, Judge Marilyn Zayas, who's also running for Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, Dr. Vanessa Enoch, who is running in the 8th District as a representative to Congress. And so we invite everyone to stay on. It's, as you know, it's really important elections, especially these judicial races at the highest levels of the state of Ohio. So we invite you to stay on. If you have any questions, you can post them either on Facebook or you can post them on the chat. And if there's time, we'll get to them. But again, we want to thank our guests for joining us here this evening, and we wish you the best.
Thank
Judge
you
Hunter,
so
may I
much.
say something? Judge Hunter, may I say something?
Sure, Mike.
I'm so grateful to you three people for doing what you're doing. I don't know how you put up with all the evil that you have to fight against every day for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Should we get out to come back in, or since we're a panelist? Okay.
You are welcome. Yes.
We're actually going to be, I'm going to put you back in the attendee role. So you'll all be
Okay.
in the attendee role, and we're going to start promoting the folks who are on the next panel.
You guys had
Thank you all.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
I was just saying, thank you all. I have to hop off. I'm on daddy duty, so I got to go feed my baby. But thank you
Absolutely.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Our next co-moderator will be Barb Wolf. So Barb, I just want you to know that we'll go in the order of the candidates on our, so we'll be starting with Congress, followed by the Ohio Supreme Court, followed by the Chief Justice, and we will rotate in that order. And please stay in order.
I am not seeing, I see
Terry Jamison.
Judge Zayas.
Okay.
He's here. Oh,
You said somebody else is here?
Judge Zayas is here, but she's not on video.
And we would also like and remind those who are in the listening audience, if you would not mind going to your Facebook pages, go to the Coalition for Just Hamilton County and share the page. Because what we have found over the years that we've done this is that before the election actually happens, thousands of people will have viewed it. Some that may not be on this evening, but they will be able to view it at the Facebook page. So it will remain public for persons to review. And also, if you have any questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat this evening. And if we have time, we'll introduce your question.
And I'm not sure if any of the other panelists are on this evening, but if you are, your name isn't appearing on the screen. So please do chat us and we will chat Judge Hunter or even myself, and we'll make sure everybody gets promoted for this particular panel.
All right. And again, we had confirmed Judge Terry Jamison, who is running for the Ohio Supreme Court. We also had, sorry.
Great job.
it was it Justice Bruner, or is she next week? But it is 8:02, and so I don't want to, belabor the time. Scheduled to start at 8 p.m. So I'll do my best to watch screen. And also just want to remind you, Mike, it's 1 minute to open, 2 minutes per question. And again, anyone has additional questions, they may put them in the chat. Let me know when we're ready, Dr. Enoch.
Dr. Enoch, you can take me off.
Oh, okay, hold on 1 second. Let me do that.
Sorry.
All right, and just give me 1 more second. I just want to make sure I saw Justice Bruner is on.
Okay.
Go ahead and add her. And if there's anyone else who should be on the panel, their names aren't appearing. So if you're there, if you can chat, Judge Hunter or myself will make sure that you are promoted as a panelist. I see a couple of hands. I'm not sure if those hands are because you are a panelist. Please do go ahead and type in the chat if you're supposed to be a panelist, and I'll make sure you get promoted, or Judge Hunter will make sure you get promoted.
So we have everyone on screen that should be right now, correct?
Everybody, let's see, we have Justice Bruner. We don't see Judge Jameson yet. So if she comes, she'll have to either change her name or chat us to make sure that she gets promoted.
Okay, I'll do my best to watch that. All right, if we're ready to go, we want to be very mindful and respectful of everyone's time that is taken the time to join the Coalition for Just Hamilton County. Again, this organization has been around for a number of years, and its mission is to promote racial equality and justice for all people within Hamilton County. And so we are very pleased to have as our guests today those who are running for office of the Ohio Supreme Court. That includes Judge Marilyn Zayas. Also running for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is Judge Jennifer Bruner. And then running for, I believe it's the 8th District of Congress, we have Dr. Vanessa Enoch. So good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. We'll start out, you'll have 1 minute to introduce yourself. When we begin to ask questions, you'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. And I would like to draw your attention, if you can see my arrow, to Diane Beaker and Michael. They will be holding the time clock. They will give you a warning at 1 minute, at 30 seconds, and at 15 seconds. And finally, they will put up a stop. And then we just ask that you respect the time. We're doing our best to make sure that everyone that is on will have equal time for their particular office, even though you're not running against one another, but we still want you to have equal time. All right, the first question to all, and I'm gonna start, Barb, we're gonna start in order and stay in that order. We're gonna start with Congress. But the first question is directed to everyone, and that is simply to please introduce yourself to our audience. And we'll start with you, Dr. Vanessa Enoch.
Hi there again, my name is Vanessa Enoch, and I am a mom, a business owner, and a concerned Ohio citizen. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 8th Congressional District, which includes the northern suburbs of Hamilton County from North College Hill north. So areas like Finneytown, Mount Healthy, Forest Park, Lincoln Heights, Colerain Township, and Wyoming, Woodlawn, and all of the suburbs on the western side of Hamilton County as well, outside of Hamilton County. I'm running because we're facing an uncertain future, and we need representatives who will fight for working families and the interest of the people, and not big corporations, big banks, and special interest groups. We can't continue asking the people who created the problem in Washington, D.C. to fix it. We need people who have actually faced adversity and who have navigated difficulties and come through them. Warren Davidson doesn't understand everyday challenges that people in our district face. So it is my pleasure to be here this evening with you. Thank you, Coalition for Hamilton County, for having us. Coalition for Just Hamilton County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to the Ohio Supreme Court, and Judge Zayas is running for that seat. Would you please, or one of the seats, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, good evening. It's great to be here. So I'm Judge Marilyn Zayas. A lot of people call me Judge Z. I'm running for Ohio Supreme Court. It's been my biggest honor to serve you in Hamilton County's First District Court of Appeals. I was born in Spanish Harlem, and I grew up in just the kind of neighborhood and family circumstances that I just never really dreamt this big. I am running for the Supreme Court for one reason, and that is to take politics out of this seat. I am running against the governor's son, and it's just really important to have justices in this seat that, I'm running with regard to this seat, that understand that we're here to serve everyone, and serving the Supreme Court means being faithful in applying the law equally to all and ensuring that there aren't politics and outside influences.
Thank you. And finally, Judge Bruner.
I'm Justice Jennifer Bruner, and I'm currently a justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, elected in 2020. And I'm running for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court because I care very much about the future of the court. I'm a Democrat. I was encouraged to run by the Republican current Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor. And my background brings to you almost 5 years as a trial judge on the Common Pleas Court in Franklin County, starting the Adult Felony Drug Court known as the TIES program. Treatment is essential to success. Also, 4 years as Ohio's first female Secretary of State. During that time, winning the John F. Kennedy Courage Award, a partisan award, the work that I did to protect the vote and make sure people have the right to vote. And also 6 years on the District Court of Appeals, which would be the equivalent, but in Franklin County, of what Judge Zayas does now. I have 17 years in private practice. I have 3 children. I've been married to my husband, Rick, for 44 years, and we have 6 grandchildren. And I have done rule of law work in Serbia, Egypt, Sri Lanka, Kazakhstan, and most recently in Benin in Africa. Thank you, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. All right, the very first question for this evening will be addressed next again to Dr. Enoch. What are the roles and the responsibilities of the position that you seek?
Thank you for that question. The U.S. House of Representatives makes and passes federal laws. The House is one of 2 chambers of federal government, and the other chamber is the U.S. Senate, and both are part of the legislative branch of government. And so the responsibility of Congress is to also establish a budget for our federal government and to codify laws. So that is extremely important, especially in this era where laws are now being struck down, such as Roe v. Wade, because it is the responsibility of Congress to codify such laws. So if we want to make sure that our rights are protected, it is those individuals in Congress who will make those decisions.
Thank you. Our next question, again, the same question is directed to Judge Zayas, and that is, again, what are the roles and responsibilities of the position that you seek? I don't know if you find that the judicial branch seems to be one of the least understood branches of government.
Absolutely. Well, the Supreme Court, we make decisions on cases that come in front of us. So, for example, one case that got a lot of attention more recently was the determination as to whether the gerrymandered maps were constitutional or unconstitutional, judging them under the Ohio Constitution. And it's appeals of all sorts. It could be a criminal case, a civil case, but oftentimes it is also constitutional challenges. The Supreme Court also makes a decision on what issues they are going to hear. So unlike the court that I serve in right now, that everything that gets appealed, my court will hear, the Supreme Court does have original jurisdiction on certain appeals.
or there is a right to appeal on certain matters. But a vast majority of cases that are appealed to the Supreme Court, they determine whether they will take that case. So if there aren't 4 justices that vote to take a particular issue on, it is not going to be resolved by our Ohio Supreme Court. The other thing that the Supreme Court does, which is very important, is it has the authority to set policies and procedure and direction with regard to all the courts throughout the state of Ohio. So this is a statewide seat. This is going to be on the ballots for all 88 counties. And this is the highest court in the state of Ohio.
All right, thank you, Judge Zayas. And finally, Justice Brunner, and thank you for that earlier correction. Your question is similar with a slight twist, and that is, what is the difference between the roles and responsibility of the Chief Justice versus the other justices?
Thank you, Pastor Hunter. So the Chief Justice is the superintendent of all the courts of the state under the rules of superintendence. There are 7 justices on the Supreme Court, as you heard Judge Zayas say. No one justice, not even the chief, has a greater say in their votes, meaning all the votes are equal. But the Chief Justice carries on a much more administrative role for the court. So there are many orders that the chief can issue that are more procedural orders. For instance, when it came to the cases involving the districts for the legislature and for Congress, when it came to an order to show cause why the respondents, meaning the redistricting commission and those working on the maps, should not be held in contempt, was an order that could be issued by the chief. The chief also decides whether a judge at any level who is asked to recuse from a case actually has to recuse. Oftentimes the judge will just go ahead and respond and agree, yes, I should get off this case. Sometimes the judge will push back and say, no, I shouldn't. And the Chief Justice is the sole decider of that question. And if that seat for that case is vacant for that case, the chief appoints a visiting judge to sit in the stead or in the place of the judge who has to get off of the case. There's a court of appeal, or a court of claims in this state. The Court of Claims is a specialized court where someone can sue the state for damages. The Chief Justice appoints all of those judges of the Court of Claims. And so essentially the Chief Justice is the leader of the courts of the state. And I hope as Chief Justice to be able to inspire all judges of the state to see themselves first as public servants who happen to be judges. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Barbara, we will proceed in order to stay on task. And so the second question, and please follow in order, would go to Dr. Vanessa Enoch.
I appreciate your prophetic.
My slip of tongue, my slide of tongue. Okay.
Dr. Enoch, this is your 3rd time running in a gerrymandered district. How has the landscape changed since you first ran for Congress? If so, how will that make a difference? And are you confident that you can overcome the racial and political barrier posed in this district?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And we are, unlike many of the districts that have been redrawn, our district does provide somewhat of an advantage to us that we did not have in previous elections. For one, we have parts of Hamilton County. This district used to wrap around Dayton all the way over to Springfield, Ohio, which made it very difficult to run for office in that part of the district. It also used to go as far north as Mercer County. And so with having a district that's closer to home, first and foremost, it gives me the opportunity to represent my neighbors, people I know. It also gives us an opportunity to run a pretty efficient ground game. So we are knocking on doors and distributing literature here closer to home. We didn't have that opportunity the last time. We are also in a position where we have more Democrats in the district than we did before. And so it presents yet another opportunity and advantage. One of the things that we discovered is that many of the people in our district don't vote in parts of Hamilton County, parts of Butler County. And we're excited to have the opportunity to get face to face with those individuals and to find out why. Many African Americans and Democrats, or people who vote Democrat, tend to vote as independents. And so we are taking the opportunity to have conversations with them in order to secure those votes. And so, yeah, it does give us somewhat of an advantage than we had in the last 2 elections. And so for that reason, we're excited about the opportunity to win this race this year.
Thank you. Judge Zayas, what qualifications, and you did allude to this earlier, but what qualifications and experience prepare you for a role on the highest court in the state of Ohio?
Well, as far as academically, so to speak, so this is my 6th year on the Court of Appeals. A lot of the work that I do on the Court of Appeals is very similar to the Supreme Court. In the time that I have served, I have actually decided over 1,200 appellate cases, and I've also served on 4 other appellate districts, in addition to coming to the Supreme Court and sitting on a case for recused justice. But as far as serving the people, which I think is a very important component of this role, it's really my own personal experience. It's bringing that. It's growing up in a neighborhood where I was expected to be a statistic. It's growing up in family circumstances that, if you said dysfunctional, I would say that would be an elevation. It's growing up in a time in which I grew up under the sting of discrimination as a Puerto Rican Latina growing up in New York City. And what that taught me is, not only am I not lesser than, but nobody's lesser than, nobody's more than. And the law is really the great equalizer because it is intended to be applied equally to all, and for that to be applied faithfully equally to all with no outside influences. That is such an important component in this particular seat because part of this seat, part of this run is to restore confidence in our judiciary. We need to restore public confidence in our judiciary, which should be, out of the 3 branches of the government, should be the apolitical branch that is not being tainted by politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb, I'm going to ask the next question because there's an error, and I don't want you to walk into that error. So the next, I'm sorry, the next question goes to the Chief Justice Brunner, who's running for Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. And the question is, what qualifications and experience, and this is pretty easy, prepare you for the role of Chief Justice?
Thank you, Pastor Hunter. The qualifications and experience that prepare me for justice are really myriad. As a person, I have been a foster mother. I've been a mother to 6 children at one time. And I think understanding the difficulties that children face when they're in a difficult situation to the point where they need to be living away from their parents gives you a very different perspective. It served me well when I went into common pleas court. Oftentimes in sort of the bridges out of poverty parlance, we say the tyranny of the moment, and you learn what people are going through that maybe middle class people would have a difficult time comprehending. But beyond that, having served at all 3 levels of the courts of the state, and having administered a statewide office gives me an advantage going in to start with a great amount of experience. And fortunately, Chief Justice O'Connor has moved the office into a place, of the Supreme Court, into a place where it's working very competently, very efficiently, and effectively. And so building on things like the statewide criminal sentencing database so that we have transparency and can collect data to understand why there are differences between the same crime, but vastly different sentences. Is it race? Is it education? Is it socioeconomic? And the Commission on Fairness and Permanent Commission on Fairness and Equality in the courts and the legal system, where we start even at the point where people leave law school and make sure that if they come from circumstances that start them behind, that we can give them what they need to be equal, so that our judges of the state can match the diversity that our state is, and our court can be more responsive.
Thank you. Barb, you'll start with question 3 for Congress.
Okay. Vanessa, what is your stance on the overturning of Roe v. Wade and reproductive rights of women as a result? And is there anything you can do if elected to Congress to change it?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Wolf. One of the primary concerns that I have is that in overturning Roe v. Wade, it overturned over 50 years of court precedents. And as Judge Brunner and Zayas can speak to, it is deeply concerning when a court decides to overturn its own rulings. And I think we all have to be concerned about that ruling, considering what it actually does is puts women back into a position that we were in over 50 years ago. We have less rights than our grandparents had, and that shouldn't be the case. So I am deeply concerned. As a congressperson, I would have the ability, as I stated earlier, to codify Roe v. Wade or legislation that would codify a woman's right to reproductive freedom. And that legislation actually has been placed on the agenda at Congress already. My opponent voted against that legislation. So it is concerning to me, and I realize that as a candidate for office, it places the responsibility in the hands of the voters to put me in office to ensure that that legislation gets passed so that women's rights can be protected across the country.
Thank you. Again, Judge Zayas, I think you alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to ask that again, and that is, how do your specific powers, if you are elected to the Ohio Supreme Court, how would that differ from your current role on the First District Court of Appeals?
I've talked about how it's similar, you know, and I've also talked a little bit about how it's different. You know, one of the biggest differences is when the Supreme Court speaks, that is the law for the state of Ohio. When my appellate district court speaks, that is the law for Hamilton County. So you can see that that's a very big difference right there. The policy and procedure right now, policy procedure, my authority is only within my appellate district. With the Supreme Court, it's for all the courts in the 88 counties. Also, the Supreme Court also has authority over disciplinary action with regard to attorneys, and also the admission of attorneys to practice law in the state of Ohio. They also have authority with regard to the rules of governance for attorneys and for courts. So there's a lot of authority that the Supreme Court has, and what's important then is whether there's a majority of justices that are willing to respect that authority and exercise that authority for the good of the state. Because, for example, there was a report 20 years ago on justice and fairness, born out of the concern of bias in the court system. And a vast majority of the recommendations from that report have been left undone. One of those is the sentencing database. That was born 20 years ago, and it wasn't until a couple years ago that there was any movement on that in creating the database, but there needs to be sufficient votes to make that accessible to the state so that anyone, not just attorneys, can look to see what a sentence looks like for similar circumstances and compare from one county to another. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb?
Yes. Justice Bruner, how is the Chief Justice involved in making a rule change in the Ohio rules of superintendents and local courts?
I'll give you a great example of that. After a federal district court decided that the State Department of Health's forbidding of transgender individuals to change their gender on their birth certificate was unconstitutional, Equality Ohio, one of the advocacy and groups for LGBTQ folks in Ohio, sent a letter along with some other organizations to
You're muted, Judge Hunter.
Justice Bruner, we cannot hear you clearly. Wonder if her computer went out.
I think she's on a phone.
She's on a cell phone.
There she
Okay,
comes.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I just pulled in my driveway from Mansfield and my Wi-Fi at home interfered with it. We're good now.
Okay.
Okay.
So the Chief Justice empowered a task force of people in response to that letter. And can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And within several months, the task force had worked to come up with a solitary probate form that would work in every county, and we were able to adopt it as a court. So having the Chief Justice, whether it's that kind of an issue or some kind of a social issue or a court management issue, the chief is the one who takes the initiative to move that forward through the process and shepherds it through the system.
Thank you. Dr. Enoch, how do you feel about the current gun legislation in Ohio that was passed by, of course, it went through the House and then it was signed into legislation by Governor Mike DeWine. How do you feel about that legislation, and what will you be able to do to reduce gun violence and make it safer in your
Thank you for that question. The current gun legislation that was passed in the state of Ohio is deeply concerning. I think every parent should be concerned. There's a couple of laws that went into effect here in Ohio. One is the open carry law, which allows people to carry open carry without a gun license, and it allows guns to be in the hands, and I might be stating that improperly, but it allows people to possess guns that probably should not have guns. And it also opens the door to being able to, I want to go back for a second. There are a couple of laws as it relates to guns, and one of them just slipped my mind that I was going to mention. But let me talk about at the federal level what can be done about them. All of the laws that have recently passed, oh, I remember, it is the ability for teachers to be able to take guns into the classroom. Both of those are deeply concerning. At the federal level, there is the opportunity to pass safe sensible gun legislation. And I am certainly an advocate for sensible gun legislation. I don't believe that there is a place in a civilized society for AK-47s and AR-15s. And there is an opportunity as we vote in a new Congress to ensure that we pass gun legislation at the federal level that would protect citizens, protect children in schools. And that's what I would do as I am elected to Congress.
Thank you. This next question is for Judge Zayas, and the question is, if you're elected to the Ohio Supreme Court, are there any efforts that you can make or initiatives that you can engage as a justice to help reduce the recidivism rate of juveniles in the criminal system?
One of the things that I'm very passionate about are specialty dockets. And as you know, there are specialty dockets in juvenile court and also in the adult court. In the adult court, things like mental health docket and veterans docket and drug court. If you look at the specialty dockets for juveniles, and I'm going to squeeze in there for adults too, they tend to be very successful because it's a partnership with the judge and community providers. So they really are very successful when it comes to recidivism. They really are very successful in helping people get on their feet, and in the juvenile system, helping families get on their feet. Unfortunately, there aren't these specialty dockets in all 88 counties. And so that's something that I'm very interested in working with the local counties and the judges, and looking for opportunities to expand those specialty dockets, which have been, the juvenile ones and the adult ones have been highly successful in addressing recidivism.
Thank you. Barbara, I believe you're on 4.
Yes. Justice Jennifer Brunner, are there any ways that the public can participate in rule changes in the Supreme Court level, or is that exclusive to judges and lawyers?
No, actually, on these rule changes, anyone can ask for a rule change with the court. Oftentimes on the task forces that the chief appoints, there are judges, there are lawyers, there are experts from other areas where it might aid the court, and there can be citizens as well. That is important to me because the more that the court can do its outreach to the public, and the public can greater understand what the court does and how the court can change and improve their lives and serve them, the more effective the court actually becomes in what it does.
Thank you. Dr. Enoch, currently different states can implement legislation in some issues that may provide for disparate outcomes among states. How do you feel about that, and what, if anything, will you do to change it?
Thank you for that question, Pastor Hunter. One of the things that federal law does that is when a federal law is passed, there is an opportunity to kind of standardize, for lack of a better word, laws for the entire country. There is this argument right now that continually ends up in court, states' rights versus federal rights, and that argument has been around for a very long time. And when a law is passed at the federal level, that law covers all of the states. It does not allow for the exclusion of certain states from those laws. And so that's why it's so important to ensure that we put the right people in Congress so that we can pass laws that will be fair, that will apply across the board to all states. Those laws supersede federal law. And so representatives who are sent to Congress from those various districts have the opportunity to chime in on behalf of their states. But it does give the overall opportunity for states to all agree on certain kinds of laws. And that would give me, as a representative to Congress, a voice in making those legislative decisions if I am elected to that role. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. Barb?
Okay, Judge Marilyn Zayas, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to fairness in sentencing, and what can you do to eliminate those disparities?
the greatest obstacle to fairness to sentencing. I think ultimately, because when you talk about sentencing, there's so much that happens before you even get to sentencing, and so that's where my brain is at. In other words, even before you get to sentencing somebody, there was a decision of somebody being charged and how they were going to be charged. There's a disparate amount of resources that people have and who they're able to hire as an attorney. So all of that is culminating into then the ultimate determination on sentencing. So there's so many layers that we can improve in the system that ultimately do affect the sentencing in addition to the sentencing itself. And so ultimately, I think the most important thing is, who are those people that are making those decisions? Who are the people that are making the decisions on who's going to be charged? Who are the people that are making the decisions on what's the gravity of that charge? Who are the people that are making the decisions on whether they're willing to offer a lesser charge or offer a lower sentence as part of a negotiated plea? And then ultimately, who are the people that are sitting on the bench making the decision on the actual sentence itself? That is the most impactful thing, because ultimately all of those people, what they're really doing is bringing themselves into that job, into that function, into their perspective of not only how they see their authority, but also how they see the people that come before them.
Great, thank you. And Justice Brunner, we're going to actually ask you the same question, particularly because the buck stops with you if the case makes it to the Ohio Supreme Court. And so what do you perceive as the greatest obstacle to fairness and equality in sentencing between different ethnicities and different social economic classes? And what are you committed to do to help alleviate those disparities if you are elected Chief Justice?
I'm really glad I get a chance to answer that question as well. I think it's a lack of transparency right now. Right now, the National Center for State Courts could contact the Supreme Court and say, how many people are on probation or community control in the state of Ohio? And it's not collected statewide together in one place. They have to go county by county by county to get this information. And when we lack that transparency, we can't even explain why someone who may have a third-degree felony for fleeing a police officer in one county compared to the same offense in another county with the same criminal law background, why one gets 5 years of community supervision and the other gets 3 years in prison. And if we are going to improve and prove to the public that our felony sentencing is fair, we have to start with being able to be transparent and explain what it is and look at why there may be differences and be able to explain that. The criminal sentencing database could start, just like Judge Zayas said, clear back at the point of arrest. But where we have to really start with it is in the court system itself. And until we know, number one, what it is, and then we look at what the differences are and why those differences exist, only then can we begin to do more than implicit bias training, where we can do better on the judicial training and the judicial college work. There's a uniform sentencing entry that's being used by about 61 judges right now, and it makes them better at sentencing because they don't forget something. Someone doesn't have to be brought back to the institution to correct a sentence. And this will allow us to collect the data in real time and start to work on this problem.
Thank you. Barb?
To Dr. Enoch.
Yes.
Oh, yes. What is your opinion on the current civil rights legislation, and what will you do to ensure Americans don't lose their civil rights?
So much of my concern as it relates to civil rights legislation is, again, what's happening at the Supreme Court level, because many of our civil rights, which we have relied upon, are at jeopardy right now. Some of those civil rights laws, such as the Voting Rights Act, has already been overturned. And Clarence Thomas has promised that more are to come. So that is a significant concern, especially as it relates to the responsibility of Congress to codify that legislation. My opponent voted against the George Floyd bill, which would have given us quite a few protections as it relates to law enforcement. It would have taken away qualified immunity, which law enforcement officers currently have, which allows them to, do certain things to citizens and to not be held responsible. And so codifying those kinds of things would give all of us the civil rights that we so deserve and that we've had for many, many years, that are now either going away or are threatened by this current Supreme Court. And so it, again, makes the legislature even more important during this time. And so as a congressperson, it would be my role, my responsibility to ensure that civil rights legislation is put into federal statute and law, so that we are protected as citizens. So thank you.
Judge Zayas, do you think that there are enough Black and Hispanic or Latino judges on the courts, nationwide, statewide, at the municipal common pleas level? Why or why not? And what do you believe is the solution?
There is a disproportionate percentage of judges of color compared to the overall populace. So for example, for Latinos currently comprise 17% of the population in the United States, but yet comprise only about, I think it's about 1% or 2% of judges throughout the United States. I will tell you honestly, Judge Hunter, I never saw myself as a judge. In other words, I never dreamt this big because I didn't see people that look like me in these sorts of positions. So one of the things that I have set out to do is to work with students so that they can dream even bigger than what I was dreaming when I was their age. So for example, every year I do a program during Black History Month where I bring together judges of color and law students of color to be able to have a meaningful engagement with judges. Since I have joined the court, I always do a program with students for Hispanic Heritage Month. And I also created a program called Educating Tomorrow's Leaders, which is a combination of learning about the court system at all levels, from the trial court all the way to the Supreme Court, and also an inspirational component. So if someone doesn't see themselves in a position, they can't dream themselves into that position. And it's not just about seeing someone that looks like you, but seeing someone that you can relate to, that has a component in their life story that relates to one's own life story. And I just think that's one of the most meaningful things that you can do. And certainly the younger you can engage with students, particularly when you're blessed with a position like this, then the more impact you can have on that young person's life.
Thank you for your candor, Judge Zayas. Barb?
Yes. I'm sorry. I was a little distracted because I got the notes. note saying that I'm down to like 8 minutes left on my pad. Okay, so sorry. Dr. Brunner, or Justice Brunner, do you think there are enough Black and Hispanic judges in the court, and why or why not, and what is the solution?
The answer is no. Recently, in the past year or two, the Ohio Black Judges Association formed. I do in my campaign a kind of a podcast called Achieving Justice. If you go to my website, which is justicebrunner.com, you can see it in the news section. And I was interviewing a young man who his name is Douglas Nobles, who's running for juvenile and domestic relations court in Franklin County. And it occurred to me that we had never had a Black juvenile court judge in Franklin County. And the decisions that those judges make on probable cause, on whether or not a potential what would be an adult crime occurred, and especially on a discretionary bind over for that youth to be tried as an adult in adult common pleas court is tremendous. And to have and when I asked Doug, would you be the first one? He said yes, he would be. And I said, how many other are there in the state? And he said, one in Cleveland. And that the impact that a person in that role has on a young person's life, on their family's life, even potentially on the community, the friends and the families who deal with this particular family, is just tremendous. And so what I would do about it is, first of all, the Permanent Commission on Fairness and Equality in the Courts and the Legal System, so that when we are testing whether there is any kind of disparity, we've got a place for it to be taken to be worked on a permanent basis and taken to the court, whether there need to be rule changes or whether there needs to be more education of judges or more to help young attorneys be on equal footing so that they too can run for judge, so that we have that kind of diversity that reflects the diversity of our population. That's what we need to do.
Thank you, Justice Brunner. Finally, Dr. Enoch, this will be your last question for the evening, and it is, what best separates you from your current opponent and makes you the best choice for Congress?
So that's an excellent question. I would say that I am a true American patriot. I really believe in our Constitution. My opponent is someone who says he believes in the Constitution. He says he believes in our rights and freedoms. However, he is an election denier. He has voted against people every opportunity he gets. He votes in favor of big corporations, big pharma, and the special interest groups. I would say that what distinguishes me is my tremendous concern for the citizens of our country, for the citizens of our district. I care. I care about ensuring that people have adequate health care, they have adequate housing, that we have a cure for cancer, and things that we here at home care about. That has not been the case with my opponent. And so when you get me in Congress, you'll get a true representative, someone who will fight for the causes that we here at home are concerned about, someone who will listen to the constituents of the district. So that's what I look forward to doing when I get to Congress, to giving true representation and a substantive voice to the individuals who live in our district.
Thank you. Dr. Enoch, I'm sorry, Judge Zayas, what is and this is your last question as well for the evening, what is your position on the appointment of judges versus the election of judges by the people? That has been a hot button topic over the years.
It's interesting because but for an elected system, somebody like myself would have never had the opportunity to serve the community as a judge. And I say that because when I ran, I really ran based on the experiences that I had as an attorney, standing next to people in their most difficult time, and those moments where you feel like the process was honored, the rule of law was truly honored, and that judge really was striving to seeking to understand and to apply things as as equally as possible. And then you have the experience when you say, "Why, gosh, we can really do things differently." So I didn't come into this with a political background. I didn't even know what a PAC was. I didn't come into this knowing anything except why I was running. And yet I ran at a time that, it was 530,000 registered voters, only 7,000 of them were Latino. This was considered to be a conservative county. And I went and I met people where they were. I went to parts of the county where I was told, don't go there because those people are not going to treat you well. And I was like, well, why not? People are people. And I just met people where they were and treated them with respect. And most people, listened and gave me an opportunity. And that's why I have had this tremendous honor to serve Hamilton County, because, the good people gave me that opportunity to listen, to share with them who I am, and then trusted this seat in me. Because, when you vote for a judge, what you're really voting for is, who do you trust? If you have an important issue that comes to the court, and in this case is the Supreme Court, who do you trust to give it to? That an elected system allows for the public to have a voice in.
Thank you. Barb, you will be able to ask the last question of the evening before we wrap up.
And before I run out of power on my machine. Okay, Dr. Brunner, or I keep calling people Dr. Justice Brunner, what is your position on the appointment of judges versus the election of judges? You've heard this question before.
So I, like Judge Zayas, likely would not have been elected to the common. In my case, my first election was to the Franklin County Common Pleas Court in the year 2000. That was 22 years ago. At the time, my children were still teenagers. The people said to me, well, what have you been doing? You haven't been on this committee of the Bar Association or that committee. And I said, well, I see myself as a public servant, as a lawyer, but now I want to give back fully as a public servant. And so I've either focused on things that had to do with my kids or things that had to do with my career, but now's a chance for me to give back completely as a public servant. And I won that election by a whopping 2 points, and was able to go on from there. And because I didn't go through the establishment ways, mostly because I wasn't male, I would have probably not have had that chance to become a judge. And then later on, I left the position to run for Secretary of State, but my law practice had been practicing election law. And so, when I served the 4-year term and ran for the U.S. Senate and lost the primary, I went back to private practice. And when I had the chance to become a judge again, maybe I would have been selected if we could have been appointed, but, it was better for me. In fact, let's put it this way, the person who I ran against had the magic O apostrophe in her last name, and she had been appointed. So had there not been an election, the people got the chance to have their say. And historically in Ohio, we have had elected judges for over 100 years. And I think that's what the people in Ohio want.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the question and answer portion of tonight's political forum. This time, we are going to allow each candidate to take 1 minute to present our viewers. And we'll start with you, Dr. Vanessa Enoch.
I come from humble beginnings, and I've had to fight for and earn everything I've ever achieved. I know what it is to struggle, and people across our district are struggling right now. After my husband died, I raised 2 daughters on my own. I struggled to earn my MBA and a PhD in public policy while raising my children as a single mom. My children were active in sports and after-school activities, and most people remember me as the mom who had her laptop computer on the sidelines or in the stands at basketball and track meets. At times, I taught at 5 colleges and I ran my own small business just to make ends meet. I know how to manage a budget and how to make a dollar stretch. I also know that those who work the hardest don't always have access to the best life. Working hard in America doesn't necessarily mean you will do well or have more, and it shouldn't be that way. No one should have to work 2 or 3 jobs to live a decent life. In Congress, I will fight for working families, and I'll ensure that across the 8th district, we have a voice at the federal level. I'll fight for healthcare, a cure for cancer, quality public school education, and higher paying jobs. Thank you so much, Coalition for a Just Hamilton County, for hosting this forum tonight and for allowing us all to participate. Again, my name is Dr. Vanessa Enoch, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Marilyn Zayas.
Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about myself this evening. Judge Hunter, I would tell you it's just been my biggest honor to serve Hamilton County here at the Court of Appeals. I'm one of those kids that I grew up in a neighborhood and circumstances where I should have been a statistic. But it's here where, the impossible was made possible in 2016. And now what Hamilton County has in front of it is an opportunity to really change the composition and the direction of our Ohio Supreme Court in a powerful, long-term, systemic way. We have some great justices that are currently there right now, but we do not have all the votes that are needed in order to make the important decisions that are going to be made, because these maps are going to be challenged again, most likely in the next term, in order to make the important decisions on the selection on the cases and significantly the important decisions on the direction, the policy, and the procedure of not only the Supreme Court, but of our courts here in Ohio. That is what is at stake here. That is what everyone in Hamilton County will have a voice in when they vote for the Supreme Court. There are 3 seats that are going to be on the ballot. I am one of those 3 seats. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Justice Jennifer Brunner.
Thank you, Pastor Hunter. I'm running because I care about the future of the courts. This is my 4th statewide race. I'm doing this because it's necessary and because for pure public service, I want our judiciary to work well for our people. I've traveled to every state, every county in this state, and the sense that I get, especially now, is that people in Ohio have values that are simply quiet decency and fairness and hard work. And they want good public servants, whether they're judges or not judges, who simply want to work for the good of people and to make government work for them. They don't want government, they're tired of the extremes. They don't want government stepping into their lives and interfering with their lives. They want government doing what it's supposed to do so that it works for them, so that they can live their lives with their family and think about what their future is and care about their communities. So, I think if given the chance to serve as chief, I can do that, and I can make sure that our government works well for people and that they don't have to constantly be worrying about what their government might be trying to do to them, and more so for them.
Thank you very much, Justice Brunner. And as we close this evening, I just want to remind our viewing audience that this was the first of 3 political forums that we will be hosting on Monday. The second will be September the 19th, next Monday from 7 to 9 p.m., followed by the final forum on September the 26th from 7 to 9 p.m. On September the 19th, we are scheduled to hear from Jennifer Kinsley, who's running for the Judge of the Court of Appeals in the 1st District, Thomas O'Barradin, who's running for Judge of Court of Common Pleas, Bernard Monday, who's running for the Court of Common Pleas, Ann Flotman, who's running for the Court of Common Pleas, Manisha Koshin, who's running for the Court of Common Pleas. That's the first hour. And then I believe on the second hour, we also have State Senator Catherine Ingram, State Representative Cecil Thomas, and also possibly Governor who's running for governor, Nan Welly, as well as is running for Senate, Tim Ryan. So again, with that, we want to thank everyone who joined us this evening. Most of all, we want to thank the candidates. We know that this is an extremely busy time for you, and oftentimes, as you get closer to the election, there are multiple forums in one night. And so we appreciate, our audience appreciates that you understood the importance of addressing the Coalition for a Just Hamilton County. So with that, we wish you the absolute best in all of your elections. And that concludes tonight's forum. Coalition for Just Hamilton County, thank you. Barb Wolf, thank you for co-moderating, as well as Carol Johnson, thank you for co-moderating. Michael and Diane, thank you for handling the time this evening. And then, of course, it goes without saying that everyone that participated and made this event successful, as well as helped to contact all of these candidates, which was a chore in and of itself. So we thank you, Ms. Patton, Carol Patton, Jackie Smith, Rema Dorsey, and anyone that I might have missed, please count it to my head. And then finally, again, we just want to remind all of our coalition members to join us at 6:30 on Monday, and then the forum will start promptly at 7 p.m. So again, thanks for joining us, everybody. God bless you, and have a safe and wonderful night.
Thank you.
Have a great
Yeah.
night.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
The recording has stopped.